Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is the author of The Remains of the Day. That's probably his best known work at this point, although he has multiple pretty well known books. The Remains of the Day was very hyped up to me. Had so much positive feedback, so many positive reviews at the time that it was published, and I read it, and I'm curious about what I would have thought of it if I just picked it up the way I did with this one, and read it, because I really didn't like it very much. But I think partly because I had pretty high expectations, and I was disappointed in it. I didn't really like the writing. I didn't love the perspective. The main character was really frustrating to me, which in a way he is supposed to be, but I just did not care for that book. An Artist of the Floating World I liked much better, even though the tone is very similar. Actually, it could easily be, to me, the same character in a different world, in a different life. He has very much the same tone, even though The Remains of the Day is British and An Artist of the Floating World is Japanese, which speaks to the author, who is Japanese English. And they both work really well, being set in England, being set in Japan, but just the voice of the main character is very similar. Also, the tone of the books are also very similar because they're both in the first person. They're both from these older men looking back over their lives, and the story is told through glimpses of present day and then flashbacks, which makes for a very kind of sad, kind of nostalgic tone for both of the books. But for me, it worked so much better in this book. They're both ultimately pretty sad stories, although I felt like this book was actually more hopeful. For me, I guess it just worked a lot better in this book. And I ended up liking this character a lot better because the main difference, even though their voices are very much the same, I think that the main difference between the two main characters in the two books is that the narrator of An Artist of the Floating World, the artist himself, is struggling through all these things, looking back over his life, but he's very genuine about it, and he's matter of fact about it, and he's doing it with his eyes wide open. Whereas in The Remains of the Day, you have to see through, as the narrator reveals his life, you have to read between the lines and see what was really going on, because the narrator won't actually admit it to you. He's very guarded and shielded about his shortcomings and very prideful. And while there's definitely some pride in this narrator, he's trying to be honest. He's trying to be not modest, but just genuine, and trying to look at his life for what it is in as humble a way as he can. And at first, it took me a while to kind of get into it. At first, I wasn't really, it had a slow start for me, and it felt repetitious. And at first I was like, is this going to be kind of like the same thing in The Remains of the Day, where you kind of have to read between the lines, because he repeats, there's quite a bit of repetition in the style. The narrator repeats multiple times, like about how he's always surprised to find how big his reputation really is. He doesn't really think about status. He doesn't really esteem himself. And he repeats this so many times that I was starting to think, okay, this is his way. This is the author's way of showing us that this is actually a conceited man who thinks more of himself than others do. But after a while, I don't think that was the intention. I think he is just trying to be honest, trying to just be truthful about his status and not be either too puffed up or too modest. But yeah, that repetition at the beginning was weird. I'm like, why does he keep saying that he is always surprised by how important a person he really is? But anyway, once I got past that first bit, I started to get really interested in the story. I think that this style, I don't love. If there's like a perspective that's my least favorite perspective in a novel, it's got to be the first person looking back at the past. That's like my least favorite. It's just the feel of it. It's so it makes all the action, all the interesting stuff is past, and so it's hard to be really committed to the story when everything is over and done. So there's nothing to really look forward to in the book, so to speak. But I think it worked well in the story. You know, it's this artist in a post-World War II Japan looking back on his life. And I think what I liked about the book, so there's a lot of profound things in this book. But what I appreciated the most was the way that he very gently kind of reveals the patterns that society kind of goes through. The way that they, you know, society will adopt and be passionate about some new idea, some new ideology, and anyone who thinks otherwise is a traitor or a terrible person or a bigot or whatever. And they go through that wave, and society, you know, things shift a little bit or shift a lot. And then they think the exact opposite way, and yet the people have essentially stayed the same. Whatever it is that they're passionate about isn't really what's important to them. What's important to them is fitting into society and being considered the most modern and open-minded people in society. And they don't actually care about the ideas that they're putting forward, really. It's about having whatever's the latest idea. And I'm not putting that as well as I would like to, but I think the book explores that so well. And the narrator is someone who's just trying to be honest. And, you know, a lot of people from his generation are so apologetic about the things that they did that contributed to leading Japan to World War II. They're taking all this responsibility, and they're being so apologetic. A lot of people of his generation are committing suicide in a way of showing apology, and he's trying to look at it, and he genuinely sees things that he did and says, yes, I see that those things were wrong, and I am sorry for those things, but it was what I genuinely believed at the time. And he's disgusted by the people around him who want to deny their part in it instead of accepting what they did and saying, yeah, I see now that was wrong. I see that was not good, and I'm sorry. A lot of people are trying to act like certain things never happened. So some people are going to one extreme and just taking too much responsibility because they can't handle the weight of what they might have done. And then there's all these other people going to the opposite extreme, and just because of pressures of society and society not wanting to have anything to do with anybody who had certain ideologies, now just flat out denying their participation in certain things, just acting like they didn't happen. And again, I think it's such a profound look at just humanity, at society, the way that people react to things, activities that were seen in 100 years ago as totally fine, and now they're seen as really bad. But instead of being like, okay, those things were wrong, now we're moving on, there's this horror of having had any connection to or any participation in those things. And yeah, just looking at the different characters and the ways that they're brave in certain areas and cowardly in certain areas, and the pressures of society, the way that societies shift, to whatever people just wanting to be part of, whatever they think is makes them noble and great, and they want to be considered part of whatever the new world is going to see as like the new morality, so to speak. And just the hypocrisy of that. And really, in trying to be so open-minded and trying to be so different, everyone actually ends up just being the same as everyone else, because nobody's actually genuine and actually holding these opinions for themselves. And that's speaking about, society at large. Obviously, you have these individuals like this artist who are more honest and looking at things more critically. And so, yeah, I'm sure I'm not putting all those ideas as well as I would like to. I'm just kind of working through in my thoughts what I thought about the book. But yeah, I think it's really profound. I think it's definitely worth reading and thinking about. I think it's very applicable, even though it's, set in Japan after World War II. I think it's very applicable to America today even. Yeah, really great. I also really enjoyed, even though he is an artist and it talks a bit about that, it doesn't focus a whole lot on the art side of things until later in the book. You get more of a view of what that meant, and it's such a different lifestyle to read about what it meant to be an artist in that time, and in that way was so, I don't know, it was so different, the way that they were producing this art as an industry in like a firm and selling it to other countries. It was just really fascinating. And the way that he talked about the way that they would follow their art teachers religiously and completely copy their styles, and they weren't allowed to have any ideas of their own. And as soon as they had ideas of their own, they're cast out. It was just fascinating. And the way that they followed the floating world, or the nightlife of Japan in this certain time and certain place, was just really interesting. And yeah, I don't know really anything about this kind of art, but it was still fascinating to read about it, and the glimpses that you get of it. Just such a different culture and time. It was really, really interesting. So overall, yeah, I really like this book, and I didn't expect to. Maybe that's why, again, with The Remains of the Day, I had really high expectations, and with An Artist of the Floating World, my expectations were very low because I didn't think I would care for it because of the author. And again, at the beginning, the writing is a little, just the tone of the writing, some of the style things. He has some quirks, some gimmicks that I don't like. Again, some repetition. So some of the tone I don't care for, but I think he just handled his subject matter and his characters really beautifully, and it has some really profound messages. So yeah, I would actually highly recommend this book. Just really interesting, relaxing. It's not too, it was just a nice kind of quiet read, but I still got, I got drawn in. I got kind of agitated by the stuff that was going on. So yeah, I would recommend this book. I actually really liked it. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.